Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we saw how a company in a sequential game was trying to decide whether to enter a market, and then at the next level, the decision was whether to price it high or to price it low. And each of these decisions that the company made at different nodes led to certain kinds of output. And these outputs would ultimately help or will help a particular company to make a particular choice whether to go into the market, whether to enter the market, or whether to price it high or low. Now let us look at some of the examples of non-sequential games. As an example of a simultaneous game, let us consider a pricing game between Surf Excel and Tide. It could be any other product. Okay. Assume that both products are being priced without any company having any information about the other. So it's like your rock, paper, scissors, where I don't know and I have to come out with an action simultaneously. If both of them end up pricing their products very high, both are going to get higher profits because these two are the only firms in the market, or a major market share belongs to these two firms. However, if one price is low and the other high, then the firm pricing low captures a substantial portion of the market share and therefore increases its profit. Now, this is where game theory becomes very, very important because the other firm has to factor in the action of the other firm and accordingly react. Simultaneous games like the one we have just described are represented in the form of a matrix. And in front of you, there is a matrix. We have these two companies, Surf Excel, which is represented row-wise, and Tide, which is represented column-wise. They have two strategy choices. They can price their product low, which is, let's say, equivalent to 100, or they can price their product high, which is, let's say, equal to 200. The figures in parentheses are the outcomes, or what we call in game theoretic language, these are the payoffs. So the first payoff is 10 and 10. Now the first in this parenthesis, the first payoff of 10 represents the payoff of Surf Excel. The second payoff of 10 after the comma represents the payoff of Tide. Similarly, in the next situation, a payoff of 15 represents the payoff of Surf Excel and 8 represents the payoff of Tide. So here we have a representation of a simultaneous game, and you can see if, let's say, for the time being, assume that Tide has priced its product at 100 and Surf Excel, which is not aware of Tide pricing its product at 100, prices its own product at 100. Well, in that case, Surf Excel will have a payoff of 10. And Tide, of course, since it is priced at 100, is going to have a payoff of 10. But if Surf Excel, without knowing that Tide has priced it at 100, prices their own product at 200, in that case, Surf Excel will end up with a payoff of 8, whereas Tide will have a payoff of 15. So, such matrix therefore represents the various payoffs that can happen under this kind of an oligopolistic scenario. As we can clearly see, if both of them price their product at 200 without knowing that the other party is also doing so, they will both end up with very high payoffs of 12 and 12 each. All right. Now, the question therefore is, how do they play this game? How do they decide how to price or what price they should be charging? In effect, we are asking this question as to how are simultaneous games played. Once we have understood the strategy options, in the last slide, we described the strategy options and the payoffs therein. The way this game is played is that the players look for an equilibrium. Equilibrium is that decision where you are ultimately going to land to. Now that equilibrium, that optimal decision, we can call it, is found in two ways. First, you identify a dominant strategy, or putting it in other words, you eliminate all the non-dominant strategy. And the second is an equilibrium is found through Nash equilibrium. We are going to refer to Nash equilibrium a little later. Let us first understand what do we mean when we say a dominant strategy or identifying a dominant strategy. Let us first understand what is the meaning of a dominant strategy. As we have written here, a dominant strategy for a player is the best outcome strategy, whatever may be the strategy chosen by the rival player. So, irrespective of what the rival player is choosing, what is the best strategy for you? So, let us go back to the earlier game. Here you can see what is the dominant strategy. Let's say Tide, we don't know. Let's say assume that Tide has priced its product at 100 and Surf Excel decides to price its own product at 100. Well, in that case, its outcome or payoff is 10. But if it prices its product at 200, then its output or payoff is 8. So if Tide sort of prices its product at 100, then the best strategy for Surf Excel, which is going to give it a higher payoff, is pricing its product at 100. As we can see here, 10 is the best payoff. Now for the timing, let us assume that Tide has priced its product at 200. Of course, Surf Excel doesn't know it. So, well, in that case, if Surf Excel prices its product at 100, then it gets a payoff of 15. And if Surf Excel prices its product at 200, given that Tide has priced its product at 200, well, in that case, Surf Excel will end up with a payoff of 12. Now you can see that in both the cases, the best strategy for Surf Excel is to price it at 100. As we can see, whether Tide prices its own product at 100 or at 200, Surf Excel's strategy of pricing at 100 gives it a higher payoff. In the first case, a payoff of 10 as compared to 8, and in the second case, a payoff of 15 as compared to 12. So a dominant strategy in this case for Surf Excel is to price its product at 100. Let us look at another example of a dominant strategy game. Let's say that there are two business schools. One school is called School of Management and the other school is called Management School. School of Management has two strategies. Let's say this is an oligopolistic market and School of Management has got two strategies. It can go for international certification or it can go for ramping up its research. Management School has another two strategies. It can go for domestic certifications or it can go for aggressive marketing. As earlier, the payoffs of School of Management are the first that is written in all the parentheses and the second payoff is of Management School. So as we can see here, if the School of Management, let's say for the time being, assume that the Management School decides to go for domestic certifications. Well, in that case, if the School of Management goes for international certification, then it has a payoff of 10. Whereas the School of Management, if it goes for ramping up of research work, then it has a payoff of 20. So given that Management School goes for domestic certification, now mind you, School of Management is not aware what is going to be the strategic action taken by Management School. We are just imagining as of now that if the management school goes for domestic certifications? Well, in that case, there are two choices that is there in front of School of Management. Clearly, ramping up of research gives it a higher payoff. So, ramping up of research is the dominant strategy for School of Management. Now, let us look at it from the point of view of management school. Or before that, let us look at the other strategy for management school. If the management school chooses aggressive marketing, well, in that case, if the School of Management goes for international certification, it has a payoff of 6. But if it goes off for ramping of research, it has a payoff of 14. Now, irrespective of the fact what the management school chooses, School of Management has a higher payoff by choosing the option of ramping up of research. So the dominant strategy for School of Management is ramp up research. Now let us look at it from the point of view of management school. And for this now, let us assume for the time being that the School of Management has decided to go for international certification as a strategy. Management school, of course, again to reiterate, is not aware of its strategy. But let's say if School of Management goes for international certification and management school goes for domestic certifications, its payoff is 4. But if management school goes for aggressive marketing, its payoff is 8. So clearly, when School of Management goes for international certification, the best strategy for management school is aggressive marketing, where it is giving it a higher payoff, 8 as compared to 4. Now, let's look at another scenario. School of Management has gone for ramping up of research. If the management school under this scenario goes for domestic certifications, it has a payoff of 12. But if it goes for aggressive marketing, it has a payoff of 14. So clearly, whatever School of Management chooses, for the management school, the best strategy is aggressive marketing. Just as whatever management school chooses, the best strategy for School of Management is ramping up research. So we have arrived at, by looking at this kind of payoff, what are the dominant strategies for these schools in an oligopolistic kind of situation? Can we have a situation where there are no dominant strategy? Yes, that's a possibility. How do we play that game? To play that game, we look at the concept of Nash equilibrium. The gentleman in the photograph here is John Nash, and many of you must be aware of the movie A Beautiful Mind, where the lead character played John Nash. So first of all, let us describe or define what is a Nash equilibrium. As you can read, a Nash equilibrium happens in a situation where the interacting economic actors choose their best strategy, given that their rivals would also choose the best strategy available to them. So, the dominant strategy which we saw in the last two games were also examples of Nash equilibrium. Because how did we arrive at dominant strategy? We looked at one player and we said, okay, amongst the two strategy, which one is the best for him? Nash equilibrium is also arrived at in a similar manner, where the, the rivals individually are going to choose a strategy which is best for them. They are not going to look at their rivals, because after all, this is a simultaneous game, like rock, paper, scissors. I am going, as a player, I will decide whether choosing rock, whether choosing paper, or whether choosing scissor, which is the best for me. And when each player in the game does this, we arrive at an equilibrium which is termed as Nash equilibrium. It could be a dominant strategy equilibrium. It could be a no dominant strategy equilibrium. We'll continue in the next video.